Yo, what's up, jazz guitar friends? Larry Tambanini here, today to talk about two of my favorite chords. Hey, you heard me play this chord, you heard me play that chord. Basically, they're two dominant chords that function in really different ways that dominant chords can function. Check it out. This chord, you could call it a G sus, you could call it an F with a G in the bass, you know. It's basically a G7 chord, right? It's going to go to there at some point, right? Many different ways I can get from that G to C. It's a dominant chord. Same thing with this, right? This dominant 7#9, the Purple Haze chord, the Hendrix chord, probably one of the greatest introductions any jazz guitar player can get going into jazz coming from a rock or blues background. And what does this chord do? It's a dominant chord that makes it more dominant, right? It's got this already in there, kind of making it angry, and it has this on top. You know, quite different from how I used this dominant chord. A lot of people think that the only way to weight a dominant chord is to make it sound like more aggro or meaner. But there's a way you have to, like, you know, sweeten it up sometimes. You can't always, you know, be dropping the hammer on these dominant chords. On ballads, you gotta play pretty, you gotta know how to have a nice sound. And, you know, you hear these chords, I would hear them like in my favorite players would be playing them, like Kenny Kirkland and, you know, so many great, you know, piano players that I would hear, and some of the more modern sounding stuff that I'd kind of hear. I just really love this sound. And, you know, sometimes on a piece of paper it looks kind of intimidating. But really, these chords, what they're doing is they're just making a dominant chord sound pretty. Because, you know, I can go, you know, now I'm doing it here, you know, I'm going to go to in D, right? If this is my A, now that's an A7, but, you know, I can go and bring it up, and I can also create, you know, much more tension from this. That's what I really love about this chord. You know, it has a much open sound for a dominant chord that I can kind of like cut here. I still have my ninth in there, so it doesn't sound like too rooted in like what a regular dominant chord is going to sound like, you know, something with a lot of heavy resolution sound. You know, but if I want to get that from this position, I can get that here. And then I end up getting that flat 9 in there. It's a really cool sound, you know. And, you know, you can keep going with it as well. Same thing for this guy, you know. If I was going to play this, I could take it down to, or even that, you know, shape to my E minor, or, you know, it resolves very nicely to a major as well. So, you know, I saw a lot of these videos about like my favorite chords and my favorite shapes, and I thought it was kind of like silly at first because there's a lot of stuff that you obviously like. But, you know, you can definitely simplify a lot of players' styles, you know, into sometimes like 4, 5, 6 different voicings. And you can get a lot of mileage out of those voicings and the very small little things that you can do out of them. Being able to have an option to play a dominant chord and make it sound a little nicer and mellow is a really good option to have, as opposed to just, you know, really wanting to just try to add, you know, more degrees of tension, you know, which is always good, but you want to be able to have a couple different pitches to choose from. If you're going to constantly be playing like maybe the same type of ideas over 2 5s, it's going to become probably monotonous for you before, you know, the listeners and the people you're playing with are going to get it. So this is a great way, you know, stick with the chords that you hear. I'm sure that, like, you know, this isn't one of the first chords that you encounter. You know, maybe outside the Hendrix thing, maybe not so much the sharp 9 as either. But, But, you know, play those sounds that gravitate towards you naturally, because those are going to be the things that you develop that, you know, and end up ultimately defining your style. So these two chord shapes that I played, you know, it sounds like I'm playing some stuff, but it's just sort of all patterns based on those shapes that I like, that I've messed around with so much. So, all right, jazz guitar friends, what are some of your favorite chords? You know, how do you work them in your practice routine, and like maybe use them in an intro or outro setting? It's ultimately going to define like your style, if that's what you're going for, and like, why not, you know, work hard at something. If you want to be good at it, try to develop your own style at some point. And that can only be done by playing the music that you hear in your head. All right, jazz guitar friends, bebop, keep swinging, and I'll be back with more videos. Peace.